As Dan mentioned, I'm engineering manager at Blue Apron. Last year, we grew by about 5x. And my team, I first started managing at Blue Apron. My team in that time has grown from just a few engineers to 10 engineers, which I know that's not an ideal team size. So if anyone's interested in managing here, we could use some horizontal scaling in that area. But what's the important takeaway here is that we've had a lot of high growth, and while scaling, we've still managed to stay productive and also maintain best practices. Recently, we re-architected a system built to sell meal subscriptions to sell wine subscriptions. And what I've been really focusing on is developing good habits for our team to inspire people to have a voice, because I think that's the biggest factor in having productive teams. So I'm gonna share those habits with you tonight and hope that you find some usefulness in it and agree that it does help keep your teams productive. First, a bit about Blue Apron. We deliver fresh ingredients to cook recipes at home every week. We launched in August 2012. We're now shipping over 5 million meals a month nationwide. The Blue Apron itself is actually a symbol of lifelong learning for chefs. Wearing a blue apron, it means they're a learner for life, and that's a core company value. That's part of the reason why I'm here tonight sharing what I've learned over the past year. We have over 3,000 employees, over 200 corporate, over 40, last I counted, in engineering, possibly more now. Last summer, we had over 3 million pounds of produce grown exclusively for Blue Apron in the ground. So back to the topic, how do we get people to work well together? We're gonna first look at this concept called psychological safety, and how does that impact productivity? We're going to look at 8 habits for productivity, and then we wanna see some results to know that these habits are actually doing something, right? So psychological safety, where does this concept come from? Some of you may have heard of Google's Project Aristotle. It was an initiative to discover what makes their teams productive. They kind of initially took a data-driven approach. They started in 2012 with the idea that we could look at data of different teams and find some kind of trend that defines, that clearly makes sense that, this team, based on this data, this team's gonna be more productive than this other team, and they found nothing. What they did find was actually from just talking to people, that what the biggest factor in whether a team was productive was whether or not it had established something called psychological safety, which is a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. So how do we establish psychological safety? Google didn't really have an answer for that beyond, well, we have to somehow influence group norms to get people to feel safe. My answer personally has been borrowing from the teachings of Stephen Covey in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So the idea is we have these good habits, we help develop them in our team, and through doing that, we influence group norms to establish psychological safety, which is really just empowering people to have a voice and being able to speak up without feeling rejected. These are the 8 habits, even though it's called 7 habits, or 8 habits. I think it's like an off by 1 error or something like that. But they are: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then be understood, synergize, sharpen the saw, and then the last one is very interesting: find your voice and inspire others to find theirs, which is, by definition, psychological safety. So first, we want to be proactive. We want to clearly define tech lead responsibilities to set expectations. Where this comes into play is, it's important to, like initially when I started, I just had one project lead working on a project, and we had everyone else kind of working on this general sprint of work. And it became apparent over time that, no one person could just kind of have ownership of all the different types of work going on. So we had to carve out other responsibilities for other people to work on, to just take ownership. But early on, we just had one project lead. And he was working on a project, it was going really well, and then it got to a point where we came to the testing phase, and all these bugs started cropping up. Luckily, it wasn't launched yet, but I sat down with him and I said, what's going on? Why are all these bugs? Just trying to understand. And he mentioned to me that at his previous company, coming up with like the test plan was the responsibility of the product team, not the engineering team. So I realized in that moment that I had failed him in not being clear about what the responsibilities are at Blue Apron and setting expectations. So now what we have is a clear document laying out all the responsibilities, where we essentially have the 8 habits laid out and examples of how to practice each of those habits. And what it boils down to is members of a team need to share in responsibility for the success of a project. At no point should we ever feel like we're throwing work over the wall to another person and letting them be responsible for it. We're all sharing in ownership. We want to begin with the end in mind and convey purpose, not urgency. Kimber Lockhart had a good Medium post about this called "Don't create a sense of urgency, foster a sense of purpose." But example that actually just came up yesterday, we were discussing our database schema and how to change it. And someone proposed that we kind of future-proof our database schema. And I think initially people were a bit surprised, because often in software we talk about avoiding premature optimization. But I think with APIs and schemas, those are things we want to future-proof, because they're kind of the foundation for the future. And what we're building now is the future and not today, right? And what was really effective with that person that was trying to convey that point was he started with answering the why. The why is we're building something for tomorrow, not today. We don't want to build a foundation that we're going to have to tear out of the ground 10 years from now, and it's going to cost millions in operational costs to us. Put first things first. Make engineer happiness a priority. If you log into Blue Apron and pull up your account management page, that was actually a passion project that engineers came up with and really pushed for, because back in the day, it was just jQuery and HTML and tables. No, not tables, but pretty bad. And it was just like painful to work in. And so they said, I'm tired of working in this. I want to learn Backbone. Let's learn Backbone. Let's fix the account management page so we're not terrified of it anymore. And they did that, and customers loved it as well. It's a much better experience, and customer support heard all these glowing reviews about it. So you want to make sure to regularly update your tech roadmap to include passion projects, upgrades, and refactors. Think win-win. It's good to have regular communication with key players to find mutually beneficial solutions that aren't just for one party or the other. My example for this is I feel strongly that engineers should pull from a backlog of work. It makes for more efficient queuing. But from a product perspective, I'm a product manager. I need someone to talk to about this task. If I have questions about how are we going to do this, is this feasible, I need someone to talk to. So if I don't know who's going to be working on the task, who do I talk to? And it was kind of this holy war, I guess, like for a while, where we were kind of like, well, it should be this way and it should be this way, and we just talked about it in meetings and it wasn't going anywhere. And this was early on, to keep in mind, but I just set up a weekly meeting with our director of product. And in that meeting, we were able to listen to each other, understand where we were coming from. And the solution was just having tech leads who own specific areas of the code base that can partner with products. So now we can still have our efficient queue, and product has someone to talk to when they have questions. We want to seek first to understand, then be understood. So we always want to encourage face-to-face communication. I'm sure you've all seen long email chains or chat room discussions or long just PR review exchanges. Recently, we had one that people were referring to as War and Peace. And they were like, yeah, I went home and I came in one day and they're like, hey, Evan, you should check out War and Peace. Like, you need to get up to speed on things. And it was just like, I opened up the pull request and there were just 80 comments. And I was like, yeah, good one, guys. So I just got them all, changed the medium. We just got in a room, and that long exchange we solved in literally 15 minutes just talking in a room. And every time something like that happens, it's always the same case because no one has an incorrect point. Everyone has value to what they're saying, and we need to come up with a solution that is addressing everyone's perspective. And one way we help encourage this face-to-face communication is we host brown bag tech talks bi-weekly, where people can talk about, hey, check out this cool thing I did, or I can practice a much more mediocre version of my presentation that I'm giving tonight, things like that. And then we also have group code review sessions. We also have breakfast PRTs, which are where we review PRs over breakfast. And this is just a good way to get people together and you can hear their voice, and because you're not hearing their voice when you're reading text on a screen. It's important to synergize, so I focus a lot on empowering through delegation. And as I mentioned, initially we just had project leads. We now have leads who are responsible for things like API support for our mobile and front-end teams, also internal tools, and then obviously our project leads. They all need to be constantly talking with each other. If someone's making some massive change to the database architecture and that impacts another team, that team needs to be involved. Leads also need to be included in important weekly meetings. So I meet with customer support every week. I meet with shipping team every week. And then also at our sprint prep meetings, it's good to have leads there because you want to be transparent as possible about how work is prioritized and give them a venue. I always get the question when candidates come in to interview, how do engineers, what's the process for engineers getting work in the roadmap? And the only answer is to just include them in the conversation, inspire them to have a voice. Sharpen the saw, which I take to mean just you want to give people support and help them develop, so just give immediate feedback. When I first became a manager, I thought engineers are smart, they can figure things out, just delegate, let them figure things out on their own, and then they'll come to me in one-on-ones or they'll bring up things in retrospectives, and that's when the time is for feedback. I was also a bit hesitant to give feedback and not want to, anger anyone. And over time, I realized it's important to identify opportunities for giving feedback immediately. So if something comes up, like in the discussion, the War and Peace example I gave earlier, after we sat down in person and hashed things out, I sat down with each person individually and talked about what happened there and how it's important to change the medium and listen to each other and collaborate when things like that happen. I obviously didn't say, hey, you should collaborate more and change the medium, but I said it in a more human way. And the important point is to do that immediately, though, and not just assume that people are going to know that's expected of them. If you do give feedback, you want to give it in private. If you give it certain feedback in public, I see this all the time, people will just kind of get defensive and shut down. So think about what you want to bring up as a question in a meeting, and then any constructive feedback, is it better to just wait till after the meeting and bring it up in one-on-one rather than potentially derailing the meeting? We want to exhibit radical candor. Kim Scott had a great post, means care personally and challenge directly. There's a funny example where she says Sheryl Sandberg told her basically what amounts to what you're saying is stupid, but you're not stupid. I'm not telling you to go to engineers and say your code is stupid, but I am saying to be direct with them, and if something comes up, not letting it go, bringing it up and talking about it, and doing it in a nice way, just being nice about it. Like, this is, when people get in arguments, we talk about it. Like, the idea is we want to have a mutually beneficial solution here. It's not about just defending an argument, it's about working together. Lastly, find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. This is a lot about balancing support with delegation. So if any of you have seen that HR give a presentation with the situational leadership graph. Pretty much, in an ideal world, you're delegating, letting people run things, but sometimes you have to switch into a role and adapt based on the situation. A recent example of this, we were working on a design for changing our database schema. And the project team was coming up with these ideas, and each person was kind of working on their own part of the schema, and we had a meeting to review this with a cross-functional team. And it became apparent in the meeting that we didn't have a holistic view of what we were trying to do with the design, and we pretty much had to end the meeting because we just weren't ready to talk about it. After the meeting ended, I grabbed the project team, we went in a room, I said, this is what I've heard. I drew out on the whiteboard the ERD that I heard, and I asked them, this is my assumption of what you're proposing. Is this right or wrong? Then we collaborated, we asked questions, we poked holes in it, and we came up with that ideal architecture. And in that moment, I could have just stayed out of it and let them figure it out, but I think it's good to set examples with stepping in at the right time and giving support when necessary. Now that we've covered these 8 habits, how do we know they actually work? We give, I don't know, has anyone heard of Glint? Does anyone give Glint surveys, or has anyone taken that? One person? We give Glint surveys every 6 months across the company, and you can even have it broken down by your department so you can see what people in your team what ratings they've given. And we have metrics like, are you happy? Do you feel empowered? And when we get back the results, we will sit down and have like a retrospective on it and look at where we did well, and then identify what are the 3 areas we can get better at, and have a brainstorm about improving that. And after that session, people actually came up to me and said, hey, this is why I think we didn't do well in this area. So it was really good to know. Up until I had that first survey result, I was like, I don't know, do people like me? Am I doing a good job? You have no clue until you have that empirical data really just confirming it for you. And what we found was Blue Apron engineers are happy overall. These are all different metrics. And not only are we happy, but there's a benchmark comparing you to other companies. And all these metrics, we were about 20 percentage points higher than the industry benchmarks. So for me, that's pretty good confirmation that what we're doing is working, that we're working on habits to make people feel they have a voice, and in turn, make them productive and happy. So, who saw this coming? If you want to be happy and join our productive team, you can apply at blueapron.com/jobs. These are all the different positions we're hiring for. That's about it. Good time for questions?
Thank you very much. So actually, a quick question for you from me.
Sure.
One of the other non-obvious things that we talked about earlier was you have engineers do customer support calls.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. It's called the Customer Connect program, and actually our entire company takes part in it. And you go to, you sit next to a customer support agent, and you actually take calls at one point, which can be terrifying. I took 4 calls, which was a record. And at one point, I thought I was done, and I turned around, and someone from HR was like, no, make him do 1 more. So they definitely take advantage of that time, but it's really good. It's good to hear the customers, but from an engineer perspective, it was really cool to just watch how our support agents are using our internal tools to just navigate and resolve issues. That's where the real insight comes from.
Very cool. Questions?
Right there.
So, how do you handle the interface between products? Because it feels like a lot of the examples you gave felt like things that product managers also could be doing, but you're on the engineering side.
Sure.
As you've gone through these habits and run your teams, like, it sounds like you have your own kind of DNA about how what engineering is doing and products doing and how you found that as you scale.
Yeah.
Repeat the question if you could.
Sure. So how do we interface with product to ensure that we have similar processes, I guess you could say? So what I was mentioning, the importance of partnering with product and meeting with them constantly, I'd probably talk to product managers just as often as engineers. The tech lead responsibilities document, that's actually used by more than just engineering teams. That's also used by product managers, so they understand what they're responsible for. I mean, really everyone in the team should feel ownership and responsibility. You don't want to have a bottleneck of, oh, this one person is responsible and has ownership of everything. You want to spread it out as much as possible.
How do you factor engineering personality into your habits? Because engineers might not be social and they don't really care about, yoga and other things.
That's a good question. I mentioned a bit about situational leadership. I think like adapting your style for different people. But yeah, if someone's not social, that's really difficult. I think what makes my job real easy is I have an awesome team of engineers I work with. Everyone gets along well. People don't have problems talking with each other. So that's something you want to, I think you want to ask yourself when you're in the hiring phase, really, if someone's not communicative and is, I mean, are you saying someone's combative? Like, someone may not be comfortable talking, but if they're friendly and they're open to being part of a team, I think that's okay. But yeah, I don't know, kind of a half answer, but.
Do you have a separate QA team, or it's somehow within engineering or within product, or how is relationship work?
Separate QA team? So engineers are responsible ultimately for if their work works or not. We have a QA team, and that's used when an engineer is like, I've tested the heck out of this, but I really don't want to mess this up. Like, I really don't want to email people 10 times or something like that. So in that case, they may, enqueue their work with QA to just get an extra set of eyes on it. But that's a responsibility of an engineer.
How does your the scheme fit in terms of promotions and raises?
This scheme, how does this scheme fit in? That's a good question, because I'm talking a lot about responsibilities, and I think a lot of teams have a ladder that defines, okay, at each level, this is kind of what's expected of you. We kind of have that in the sense of if someone becomes a tech lead, and that role has a lot of responsibilities, right? But usually how most organizations handle this is engineering ladder, which is something we're working on.
Last one,
yeah.
You talked at the end about the process, like the review meeting you go through after you get your survey feedback.
Yeah.
Can you tell more about like how that works and if you do that with your team, and I guess go more into that?
Sure. I just took. Oh, sure. So the question was, with the Glint survey results, how do we review that with our team? So what I did is I just set up a meeting and I ran it like a typical retro, where I identified the 3 areas where we scored the lowest, and I said, this is where we scored the lowest. Let's brainstorm about how we can get better at this. And for each one, we had a bullet point list of ways to get better at those things. And then that's good for me just to keep in mind. That's good for the whole team to keep in mind. And then what I got a lot of value out of was just the people coming up to me afterwards, just kind of in passing, saying, hey, I think this is why we didn't do well in this metric. And a lot of times why will be something like very specific and clear, some miscommunication or something went wrong along the way. And that's good, because you've elicited this feedback that you probably wouldn't have, and you wouldn't have known, why didn't we do good on this metric?
All right, Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.